Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. It was toothpaste. That's how it started. Camille stood there comparing two different brands of whitening toothpaste, like we were about to solve world peace through fluoride. She kept flipping the boxes, reading the fine print like it mattered. Me? I was just standing beside the cart, holding a 12-pack of toilet paper and dying a little inside. She said, "This one has baking soda and peroxide. You think that's better for my enamel?" I didn't answer. I was too focused on how she hadn't touched me in weeks. Not even by accident. She used to hook her arm through mine in stores like this. Now I was just a roommate who knew when the dish soap ran out. I muttered, "They're both fine," and placed one in the cart. She didn't even notice I picked the cheaper one. She just kept talking, this time about how her coworker Jasper, yeah, him again, used natural charcoal toothpaste and had an amazing smile. I swallowed hard. That man had been showing up in more of her sentences than I did lately. The weirdest part? I didn't even hate Jasper. I hated that he existed in her world in a way I no longer did. He was fun, spontaneous, always just giving career advice, or tagging her in memes at 1 a.m. She once called him an idiot, with a smile that made her cheeks glow. I hadn't made her cheeks glow in 2 years. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, listening to Camille's soft laughter coming from the living room. She was watching something on her phone. I knew that laugh. It wasn't for sitcoms. It was for attention. His attention. Still, I didn't say a word. I rolled over, pulled the blanket tighter, and told myself not to be dramatic. 2 weeks later, we were at a dinner party her agency hosted. Rooftop venue, string lights, overpriced hors d'oeuvres, the works. She wore a silver dress I hadn't seen before. She didn't ask me how I looked. We mingled, or more accurately, she mingled. I stood behind her like her unpaid security guard. Jasper showed up, of course. They hugged for just a second too long. I saw it. I felt it. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't drag her away. I just stood there, glass in hand, while she laughed at his stories and leaned in closer each time he spoke. And every time her hand brushed his arm, it was like someone was chiseling pieces off me. Quietly, without witnesses. At one point, I caught a reflection of myself in the patio heater. Pale, silent, pathetic. A man slowly being replaced while no one, not even himself, bothered to stop it. And then, she saw me watching. Camille turned, narrowed her eyes like I'd committed a crime, and loudly asked, right in front of everyone, "Why aren't you jealous?" There was laughter in her voice, but it wasn't playful. It was mocking. And I, Liam Halloway, 37, high school English teacher, world-class pushover, finally spoke. "Why would I be jealous of my ex-wife?" The words came out before I knew I'd said them. The music didn't stop, but people definitely heard. A guy with a man bun dropped his slider. Jasper blinked like he wasn't sure if this was a joke. Camille's face. I'll never forget that face. She looked like she had just stepped off a cliff and realized the ground wasn't where she left it. I didn't stay. I didn't grab my coat. I just walked away. From her. From Jasper. From aisle 7. From toothpaste debates and silent resentment. But if you think that's where the story ends, you're wrong. I didn't slam the door behind me. I didn't even glance over my shoulder. I just kept walking down the dim rooftop stairs like I was trying to leave my own skin behind. The air outside was colder than I expected for spring. But I didn't feel it. My body moved on its own, like it was running from something I still wasn't ready to face. The ride home was silent. No music. No angry phone call from Camille. Just the occasional buzz of my phone from friends who'd been at the party. I didn't look. I didn't want to read the "what the hell was that?" texts or the "are you okay, man?" pity messages. I didn't want anyone to witness my humiliation, even if they already had. When I got home, I sat in my car for 22 minutes. I counted. I didn't cry. I just stared at the garage door, thinking how strange it was that I still lived here. That inside, on our shared bed, were probably throw pillows she arranged this morning without even knowing she'd never see them again. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't brave. I didn't have a plan. I didn't pack a bag or grab important documents. I walked in, went straight to the office and sat in the dark. It still smelled like her perfume. Not the strong kind, but the light one she wore when she was pretending to be effortless. The one she wore when she flirted without blinking. I thought I'd feel rage. But mostly, I felt this strange calm. Like a dam had cracked inside me, and all the pressure was finally gone. She wasn't here to argue, to deny, to gaslight. For once, I could breathe. Around midnight, I heard her car. I didn't move. I listened as her heels tapped down the hallway and stopped outside the office. She didn't knock. She just opened the door and stood there like I was the one who needed to explain myself. "You embarrassed me," she said. "Not what happened. Or why did you say that? Just you embarrassed me." I looked at her for a long time. Her makeup was smudged. Her hair was falling out of its perfect updo. But what got me was her expression. It wasn't anger. It was panic. Not because she missed me, but because the narrative she controlled for so long was slipping. "I didn't embarrass you," I said. "I told the truth." She scoffed, arms folded. "You overreacted. Jasper's just—" "Camille, I don't care who he is," I interrupted calmly. "You've been emotionally checked out for months. I just finally caught up." Her face tightened. "So what, you're leaving?" I didn't answer. Instead, I stood up, walked past her, and into our bedroom. I grabbed my laptop, my headphones, and a sweater. I knew I wasn't sleeping there. Not tonight. Maybe not ever again. "I guess that's a yes," she muttered behind me, and I said it again. Softly, this time. Why would I be jealous of my ex-wife? Then I walked into the guest room, shut the door, and locked it. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want to hear her try to rewrite the story again. I was done editing myself to fit her comfort. Lying on that hard guest mattress, I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "You did it, Liam. You finally said something." It wasn't power I felt. It was grief. But sometimes, the deepest betrayal doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with a slow, quiet fade-out. The next morning was awkward, but not in the way you'd expect. Camille didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't even look particularly sad. Instead, she made coffee like it was any other Tuesday, humming softly under her breath as if the night before had just been some bad dream she refused to acknowledge. I sat at the dining table in silence, watching her from the guest room doorway, gripping my cup like it could anchor me to the floor. She finally looked up and said, "You're being dramatic." I didn't respond. I was too busy trying to decide whether she believed her own words or was just trying to control the narrative again. "I told people you were having a rough time," she added a moment later. "You didn't mean what you said. You just snapped." That hit harder than I thought it would. She was already rewriting the story, turning me into the unstable husband, the one who couldn't handle his emotions, the one who snapped, as if my silence for months, my complete emotional shutdown, was some passing phase instead of the slow rot she'd ignored. I pushed my chair back and left the kitchen without saying a word. I had to, because if I didn't, I might have screamed. Or worse, agreed with her like I always did. Later that afternoon, I checked my phone. Sure enough, 3 missed calls from mutual friends. 2 vague texts. One from her best friend, Harper. "Hey, just checking in. Camille said you're going through something?" Going through something. Not "you okay?" Not "do you want to talk?" She'd already framed the narrative. I went for a drive, no destination. Just away. I didn't even pack a bag. I just drove with the windows down like I could outrun the version of me she had sold to our entire social circle. The one who didn't try hard enough, who was emotionally unavailable, who didn't support her career. And the sad part? I did believe some of it for a long time. I let her rewrite me until I wasn't even sure what parts were mine anymore. I ended up at an old diner off the highway. One of those places with torn booths and a jukebox that only plays songs from before you were born. I sat there for hours. I watched strangers talk. I watched a couple laugh over milkshakes. I kept wondering how many of them were pretending, too. When I got back home, it was dark. Her car was gone. There was a note on the counter, scribbled in her rushed, looping handwriting. Need space. Staying with Harper. No apology. No questions. Just space, the one thing we already had too much of. That night, I finally did what I hadn't let myself do in weeks. I opened her laptop. I didn't dig too far. I didn't have to. Her messages with Jasper were there, tucked neatly in the work chat folder. Like she thought naming it something boring would keep me away. Dozens of conversations. Some flirty, some not. But one stuck out. One that made my stomach drop. Jasper. He won't leave unless you push him. Some guys need a reason to walk away. Camille. Maybe I gave him one last night. I stared at the screen for a long time. I read the message over and over, hoping I was misinterpreting it. But I wasn't. She wanted me to walk away. She had choreographed it all. My silence, my breakdown, my exit. I was just playing the role she needed me to play so she wouldn't have to be the villain. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was something worse. Empty. Because for the first time I realized I had been walking alone in that marriage for years. I just didn't notice until she stopped pretending to walk beside me. The strangest thing about betrayal is how ordinary it looks. When I came back from the drive that day, expecting something, maybe tension, maybe guilt, I was instead met with the smell of candles and the sound of Camille laughing on speakerphone with her sister. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just caught her and Jasper practically scripting my exit. I didn't interrupt. I stood in the hallway for a moment, just listening. She was telling her sister I was going through some existential phase and taking things way too personally. That was the version of me she had settled on, the overly sensitive husband who couldn't handle a confident wife with male friends. I almost admired how efficient her spin was. She hadn't wasted a second. Later that evening, she texted me from the bedroom. Yes, texted me while we were in the same house. To say she wanted to talk when I calmed down. That's when I realized something important. Camille wasn't scared of me leaving. She had been hoping I'd do it so she could play the role of the victim without actually pulling the trigger herself. All she needed was for me to look unstable, unhinged, or even just depressed enough to walk away and leave her the house, the story, and the sympathy. But I wasn't going to give her that. The next day, I scheduled a meeting with a divorce attorney, a quiet man named Ronald Whitley, who looked like he'd seen every type of marital implosion under the sun. When I laid everything out, no yelling, no violence, just months of detachment and evidence of emotional infidelity, he nodded slowly and said, "This is one of those slow burns, huh?" I nodded back. "Let's start with securing your part of the assets," he added, as if it were the weather. That's when it hit me. This wasn't dramatic. It was methodical, the opposite of what she wanted. When I came home, I didn't say a word to Camille about the lawyer. I just started changing passwords, backing up files, and photographing documents. She noticed. She asked questions. I answered with cold, distant civility. It drove her crazy. "Why are you acting like this?" she snapped during breakfast. "Are you seriously going to throw everything away over a few stupid texts?" "Texts that referred to our marriage like a waiting room," I replied, not even looking up from my phone. "I didn't throw anything away. You did. I'm just finally stepping around the trash." She looked stunned. Not because of what I said, but because I said it calmly. Camille didn't know how to deal with quiet decisions. She thrived on chaos and reaction. Silence? That was power she couldn't control. A few hours later, I got a call from Harper. She was concerned. Said Camille was really struggling and felt blindsided. I asked if Camille had told her about Jasper. There was a pause. "She said you misread things," Harper said carefully. "That you got emotional and exaggerated what was just a work friendship." I laughed. Not loudly. Just enough that Harper knew I was done playing the weak husband. "Tell her," I said, "that her ex-husband doesn't need to exaggerate anything. She did the heavy lifting herself." And I hung up. That night, Camille came into the guest room and sat on the edge of the bed. "You're really doing this?" she asked. Her voice wasn't angry anymore, just confused, like I'd broken the script. "Yes," I said. "And for the record, I would have fought for us, if there had been anything left to fight with. But you burned it all down months ago. She didn't reply. She just stared at the floor, like she was finally seeing the ashes for the first time. The day after our last conversation, Camille started playing a new role, the remorseful wife. Almost overnight, she went from detached and defensive to soft-spoken and nostalgic. She cooked breakfast. She wore the sweatshirt I bought her on our second anniversary. She even lit candles in the evening and put on a playlist we hadn't listened to in years. At first, I thought maybe, just maybe, she had finally realized what she'd done. But it didn't take long to understand what was really happening. She wasn't sorry. She was scared. Not scared of losing me. Scared of losing the narrative. You see, when I hired the attorney, I made sure to document everything. Screenshots, timelines, her messages to Jasper, my bank statements, quietly, precisely, and legally. The truth was no longer just in my head. It was something that could be seen, proven, traced. And Camille, for all her charm and manipulation, couldn't control a paper trail. That evening, she knocked on the door of the guest room and asked if we could just talk. She brought 2 cups of tea like it was some kind of peace offering. I let her sit, but I didn't touch the tea. I just waited. "I've been thinking," she began, "about everything, and I know I haven't been fair to you. I got caught up in work, and I let some friendships go too far, and I didn't protect what we had. That's on me." She paused, searching my face for something. Maybe softness, maybe forgiveness. I gave her neither. "But I don't think divorce is the answer," she continued. "We can still fix this. We've been through worse." That was the moment I felt a strange kind of ache in my chest. Not because I wanted to go back, but because hearing her finally admit something, anything, felt like watching someone arrive at a party after everyone else had already gone home. "You had 1,000 chances to fix this," I said quietly. "I begged for your attention. I tried to talk. I gave you every opportunity. And every time you acted like I was the problem." Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't sure if they were real or just part of the show. "You're right," she whispered. "I was scared to admit I was wrong." "No, Camille," I replied. "You were scared to look like the bad guy." She blinked. That hit her harder than anything I'd said before. "You spent months building this image of me, the distant husband, the emotional mess. You were setting the stage. But I didn't follow the script, did I? I didn't explode. I didn't cheat. I didn't vanish. I just watched. And then I left." She reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was trying to protect whatever small pieces of myself I had left. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Can't we just start over?" I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "Start over? You erased me while I was still standing next to you. You replaced me in your heart, in your head, in your text messages. And now you want to rewind like nothing happened?" Silence filled the room. "I didn't sleep with him," she finally said. I stared at her. "That's not the win you think it is." She looked away. I stood up, walked to the door, and paused. You know, for a long time I thought I was too weak to leave. But it turns out I was just too loyal. And you took advantage of that. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was sad, but because I was finally beginning to see the truth clearly. Camille didn't mourn the end of our relationship. She mourned the loss of control. And now that the script was broken, she didn't know how to play the scene anymore. 2 days passed. Camille didn't say much, and for the first time in years, the house felt like it was breathing. Not peacefully. More like the tension had stepped into another room, waiting. I kept busy with work, with paperwork, with long walks that ended nowhere. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I wasn't ready for the parade of sympathy or unsolicited advice from friends who'd seen nothing but highlight reels of our marriage. But Camille, she moved faster. She started posting photos on social media again. Smiling selfies, aesthetic coffees, captions about finding strength. It was subtle, strategic. Nothing directly about me, but it painted a picture. The strong woman picking herself up after being abandoned. I didn't care about the likes. What hit me was the intent. She was laying the groundwork. If anyone asked what happened between us, they wouldn't hear about Jasper or manipulation or gaslighting. They'd hear about me. The distant, emotionally unavailable husband who just walked out one day without a fight. And then, something unexpected happened. One of Camille's friends, a woman named Elise, reached out to me. We weren't close, but we'd shared dinners, birthdays, casual conversations at barbecues. Her message was simple. Hey, I know this is awkward, but I think you should see this. Attached was a screenshot. A group chat. Camille, Harper, and 2 other friends. They were discussing how Camille had finally pushed Liam to snap, and how he's being so calm it's actually ruining the story. Camille even joked that if I kept playing the quiet victim, she'd end up looking like the villain. That was the moment something broke in me. Not just anger, but this deep, suffocating wave of realization. She didn't just betray me emotionally. She was actively crafting her victimhood. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated. The emotional version of fraud. I thanked Elise. She told me she'd already left the group chat. Said she couldn't stomach it anymore. And that was the first time in weeks I felt even a flicker of validation. Someone outside of my own mind confirming what I already knew. That evening, I printed the screenshot. Not to confront Camille. Not yet. But to add it to the quiet pile of truth I was building. The one that would matter when this went beyond the walls of our home and into lawyers' offices and family meetings. Camille noticed my change in energy. She started being sweet again, making my favorite meals, asking about my day, even putting on the shows we used to watch together, then pretending to laugh at the same parts as if we were still synchronized. But none of it worked, because now every gesture felt rehearsed. Every smile, an attempt to soften the blow she thought might still be avoidable. I wasn't explosive. I wasn't cruel. I was done. That night, I handed her the screenshot without a word. Just walked up to her on the couch and placed it on her lap. She stared at it. Her face flushed. Her hand trembled slightly, but she didn't say anything. You didn't just lie, I said. You made me the villain of a story you wrote before I even knew there was a plot. Still, she said nothing. So I added, and the worst part? You didn't expect me to figure it out because you thought I was too weak, too quiet, too small. She looked up. Liam, but I cut her off. No, you don't get to control this anymore. I turned and walked out of the room. Not because I was dramatic. Not because I wanted her to chase me, but because the truth didn't need her permission anymore. By the end of that week, Camille had switched tactics again. The remorse act was clearly losing steam. So now came the version of her that operated through veiled guilt trips and twisted nostalgia. She didn't beg me to stay, not directly, but she started leaving little breadcrumbs. Old photos sitting out on the coffee table. A playlist playing softly from the speaker that I used to put on during late-night grading sessions. Even her perfume changed back to the scent she wore when we first met. It was manipulative in the most subtle, psychological way possible. She wanted me to feel like I was leaving behind something meaningful, something worth saving. But the truth? She had already buried it long ago. I was just the last one still carrying flowers to the grave. On Saturday morning, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, looking like she was about to deliver a speech. She waited until I looked up from my phone and said, I talked to my parents last night. I didn't tell them everything, just that things are rocky. I didn't respond. I knew what this was, a soft warning. Camille was letting me know that if this divorce went public, she would control the first wave of the story. The narrative, the headlines. I told them you've been distant, that it's been hard for you emotionally these past few years. She added carefully. I didn't want them to hate you. I laughed quietly. Of course you didn't. She tilted her head. Liam, I'm trying to make this as painless as possible. That line. As painless as possible. Like she was putting down an old dog. You're not trying to make this painless, I said. You're trying to make sure you still look like the one who got away. The one who tried. Her expression hardened. The softness vanished. There she was, the real Camille, calculating, cornered, and now visibly annoyed that her emotional campaign wasn't working. "You always twist things," she snapped. "No," I said calmly, standing up. "You twist things." I just finally stopped agreeing. That afternoon, I got a text from her mother. We weren't close, but I respected her. The message was full of vague concern. "Camille says you're going through something. If you need to talk, I'm here." I didn't reply. I was done playing the role of the broken, confused husband who needed clarity. Camille had spent years setting that stage. But this time, I wasn't walking out in costume. I forwarded the group chat screenshots, Jasper's messages, and my timeline to my attorney. I didn't want revenge. I wanted freedom with receipts. Ronald, my lawyer, called the next day. "This is strong," he said. "Very clean case for emotional abandonment and character manipulation. She won't want this going to court." But I almost hoped she'd push it there, because for once, I wouldn't be the one whispering my side of the story behind closed doors. I'd say it all, loudly, clearly. The next evening, Camille caught me packing up some books and personal items. Nothing dramatic, just a small box. She leaned against the doorway and asked, "So, this is it?" "This is me starting," I said. "Not ending." She opened her mouth like she had something prepared. Maybe another speech, another manipulation. But nothing came out. Because finally, there was nothing left for her to say that I didn't already know how to ignore. That night, I slept with the door open. Not because I wanted her near, but because I wasn't afraid of her anymore. A week later, the movers came. It was surreal, watching strangers pack up pieces of my life while Camille sat silently at the kitchen table, pretending not to watch. There were no more speeches, no more fake tears, just boxes, tape, and the dull hum of finality filling the house. I left behind the furniture, the appliances, the art prints she insisted we hang but never really liked. I took only what was mine. My books, my records, my laptop, and a few framed photos, only the ones where I recognized the version of myself that still had a voice. As I was about to walk out for the last time, Camille stood up. "You're really not going to say anything?" she asked, arms folded. I turned, met her eyes, and replied, "I already did. You just weren't listening." No anger, no drama, just the clean cut of truth. I watched her blink, trying to summon something to say, but the silence between us had grown too vast, and I had no desire to build a bridge back. Outside, the air felt lighter. My car wasn't even fully loaded, but I already felt like I'd left 10 years of emotional weight on that doorstep. A few days later, I moved into a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy, just quiet, peaceful. I bought myself a new set of dishes, hung a map on the wall, and started making breakfast again, just for me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I was walking in a straight line forward. I started seeing a therapist. Not because Camille suggested I needed one. She used to say that like it was an insult, but because I finally wanted to understand why I let myself shrink for so long just to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. And you know what? I'm not bitter. I'm grateful. Because walking away taught me something staying never could. I'm not afraid of starting over anymore. I don't need someone to see my worth. I only need to stop giving it away to people who pretend they do. Camille, I don't hate her. I don't wish her harm. I just hope she finally learns the difference between attention and love, between admiration and respect, and between playing the victim and actually being one. As for me, I'm not a new man. I'm just finally becoming the man I used to be, before I got lost in someone else's story. And this time, I'm writing my own. If you made it this far, thank you. Now it's your turn. Tell me in the comments. What moment in history do you think changed the course of everything? Maybe it was loud. Maybe it was quiet. But like in my story, sometimes the turning point doesn't come with fireworks. It just comes with a sentence. This has been Reddit Confessions. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.